Sorry for this technical change, but it was a bit too chilly, so we decided everyone should be share their body heat. Some of you came to see me speak a few years ago, and I don't think too much has changed since that point, even this PowerPoint presentation. But hopefully what we can get done today is just some clarity on what I feel are the basics, and then maybe some transfer to individuals who will be involved in the protocol a bit later. My work is done predominantly in track and field. I coach maybe 30 hours a week on the track, early morning starts and sometimes late afternoon finishes, and I spend some of my time in team sports. It's been football for the past 2 years, now it's back to rugby. And what I try to do is create a philosophy that is transferable to my short sprinters, my longer sprinters. I have a long jumper again, you know, to team sports, rugby, football, to rehabbers. So hopefully there's things you can take away from today that, you know, transfers to a few things you're doing on a runway, if it's javelin, long jump, if you're 4 hurdles, if you're straight sprints. I really feel like we're all humans at the end of the day, we're all athletes. So there are some common denominators that we should be really clear about. And then only after that do we start to make a distinction for our event. Again, I like to start this video all the time because it's just a bit of a reminder. It kind of keeps me level because in this race here at London Anniversary Games, you've got nine sprinters. They're all run sub 10. You know, half of them are from the Caribbean islands, a few from the States, one's from France, 2's from Britain, and some of them are tall, some of them are short, but they all find a way. And I think that's always an important reminder, is that when we talk about technique of sprinting, I've had to realize that we shouldn't be looking at all the moving parts. There are some key parts that we need to talk about and that we need to focus on. And when we get those parts right, actually I've started to let the other parts go. I've started to say to myself, well, those nuances are due to, you know, the athlete's individual history, their body type, some of it's their training history. So some of that stuff isn't what I should be focused on. By all means, I could focus on it and I could change it and we could try to measure it, but sometimes it's a fool's errand. I just want to focus on what really matters. I'm a simpleton. I've only got so much time, so much energy, and in fact, there's only so much information an athlete can take on board. So what are you prioritizing on to get your short or tall person from 0 to 100 as fast as possible? So maybe that's a question to you guys to start with. What are the common themes that you see across sprinters? What are the common things that we should be looking at? And maybe what based on your history or based on your philosophy, have you learned to let go? Have you learned to not worry so much about? It's a question to the crowd, to the audience. Because I've wasted time. I've wasted years trying to coach things and gone, it looked pretty and it sounded right, and my mentors or the science said it was right, but actually when I focused on other things, it just fixed itself. Has anyone experienced that?
There's like a huge variation in arm movement.
Yeah.
So trying to get someone into one particular way of their arm movement.
I agree. I agree.
I think also you find some people tend to be more comfortable in different positions in the race.
Yeah.
Some people get better at projection over 10, 20, 30 metres.
Yeah.
Other people may be better at the latter end of the race.
Awesome.
And it's coaching those, from what I've learned over the past 2 years especially, is that no one athlete is the same in the group. So they all have individual things to coach individually, rather than trying to fit them in a pigeonhole and coach everyone the same way.
It's a great point. Imagine you took 45 steps in a 100-metre race. You could have a strength or weakness across any of those steps, any of those segments of the race. The question is, do we coach their strength or coach their weakness?
Strength.
Strength. I think strength's all the way. If that's what brought you to the table, if that's what brought you into high-level competition, it's what's going to take you further. At the same time, maybe what's limiting you making that next jump is your weakness. So then we have to find a way to address a weakness without taking away a strength. And again, that can be a hard thing. JB Marin, this is one of his slides. he was speaking to me yesterday. He's been a speaker to me the past 3 or 4 years. And he's world renowned across sports science for talking about resisted sprinting, for applying some very complicated scientific models to acceleration, and actually he comes up with a summary which I've again summarized further into bits of my philosophy. I think there are two main tasks of our body and a third that connects them. One is projection, the other is reactivity. I think most of our hip muscles, our posterior chain, our hamstring muscles are all supporting us projecting ourselves down the track. And the easy way to look at it is, if I want to run a certain speed, I know it's my stride length, my step length, times my step speed, my frequency. Yeah, that's. I always want to come back to that. There's a real simple equation to run really fast. It's your step length times your step frequency. For some people, it's going to be length dominant. For some people, it's going to be frequency dominant. And even for that one individual, it may be length dominant at a certain point of the race and maybe frequency dominant towards the end. I don't think that's the most efficient way of doing it. I think you need to find whatever frequency you need to find early and just add length to it every step. Well, that's going to be a big discussion point today. But we have these two things. So we have the need to produce force for our hips and project ourselves down the track, and then the need to recycle force. Most of that comes from our elastic qualities. Really, we're talking about hamstrings, Achilles, calves. But step for step, we need to switch. We need to make sure we utilize our reflexes. And the most important reflex for sprinting, or one of the most important reflexes, is the extensor reflex. They call it the stumble reflex. It's something that everyone talks about in different ways, but essentially it's a symbiotic relationship between your ability to push as well as your ability to flex. So we all know both legs work together. If one leg pushes more, maybe the other leg can flex a bit more as well. And you get to this position where you're at the top of your stride and you have to exchange your limbs. And trying to do that consciously is slow. But if we can access a habit, a routine, a reflex, it can enhance both the pushing and both deflection. Yeah, exchanging of our limbs. So switching is going to be a big deal. I'll always talk about it because I think it enhances our ability to move. There shouldn't be much writing on this, but there's one for you. This paper came out recently. The summary is of two things. One, acceleration. The biggest constraint is, can you rotate your body and throw yourself forwards? So we talked about projection. Can you throw yourself forwards? But not just one step. Can you throw yourself forwards and keep catching yourself to continue to throw yourself forwards? So when I talk about acceleration, I spent a lot of time talking about body angles, shin angles, low recovery, and not that we don't coach that or teach that or work on that anymore, but it's to what end? What mechanical advantage am I trying to create? What am I trying to do? I'm really trying to get these guys comfortable at consistently rotating their body forwards and throwing themselves forwards and catching themselves and doing that effectively. And that then starts to allow you to look at people and go, okay, he has a bit of back cycle, but can he consistently do that and set himself up into max velocity? So maybe for this individual right now, over focusing on how much he recovers his foot high or low is a waste of energy. Maybe those qualities are physical qualities that need to be developed in the gym or on the floor doing core-based work and standing over hurdles, being able to stabilize their spine whilst they move their limbs. Maybe it's not something I can overcoach right now. It's important because we all see Shelly Ann, or we see Bolt, or we see DeGrasse, or we see people and we see a technical model at sub 10 or sub 11 and we go, right, we need to do that now. But it's funny, if you watch a video, everyone will see different things. Everyone is looking at different things. And hopefully by the end of this, we're all looking at the same thing. Acceleration is about rotating your body and throwing your body out there. Max velocity is about creating vertical stiffness. So when I talk about technique and when I think about technique, when I watch a running technique, I'm purely looking at those things. When I see aberrant backside mechanics and poor hip position, by all means, it screams out and I try to edit it. But actually, I've spent less time talking to the athletes about changing things and more time manipulating their stride length of cones or of hurdles or resisted or assisted, whilst recognizing what is the mechanical underpinning quality that needs to change and changing it separately away from the technical session or intertwined with the technical session. If there's a lumbar pelvic issue, if they can't stabilize their pelvis and they leave it behind them and they've got a big anterior tilt, do I talk about anterior tilt? Maybe, sometimes. Do I set up some drills that really encourage them to feel what it's like to have a neutral pelvis? Probably. And then I ask them questions and, what's the difference? What does it feel like? And when they start to make sense of it, and okay, well, when we watch this run, that's what I see, and then they start to connect the dots. I got very, very frustrated trying to tell people to do things and them not doing it and blaming them. You're lazy, not listening, you're all these things. It's easy, right? It's easy to do that. But actually, if you take a step back, you go, it's not you, it's me. Maybe it's not you, it's me. And actually, maybe I can construct a different training session. Maybe I can do something more before. Maybe actually we need to sit down and watch video, away from training, away from the anxiety of trying to copy it. Just to sit down and say, what do you see? What do you see in yourself? What are you trying to do? How will you make yourself better? Because actually, if the athlete doesn't understand what they're trying to do, there's no point trying to coach it. A third of them will get it straight away, and 2/3 of them will make you lose your hair. Yeah, mine's already going. So I'm asking myself, firstly, so this paper is very nice because it really summarizes what's been out there before. Take a look at it. It just says, okay, well, look, at the end of the day, we are trying to rotate ourselves forwards and really try to increase our step length whilst minimizing our ground contact time. How do we do that? We do it by minimizing our stance distance here. So we don't want to land too far out in front and we don't want to push too much behind. It's that simple. It's that simple, guys. But then I can make it a bit more complicated so we can look at more words. So there are some key things that we want to see. By all means, the first key thing is, can they rotate themselves and throw the body weight out? First step, great. Can they do it again? Second step, third step, fourth step. Can they continue to do it? If they continue to do it, there are some key things that maybe occur that allow them to do it. So let's talk about the stance leg. Shin parallel to trunk. We all know that, right? It's an important visual cue to see. And I think most of us like right angles. We like seeing adjacent and parallel angles. And so it's quite simple to see these things. Mid stance. So once you've put your body weight on your leg and you're starting to push, we want to make sure that you're spending little time on the ground. The question at toe off is full extension of hip with extension of knee during toe off. So basically what I'm saying there is sometimes we don't see a straight line all the way from ear to ankle. I think I was taught that. I think everyone is taught that triple joint extension. And I truly believe that because we like straight lines and right angles, that we expect a fully locked out knee. Whereas if we have a fully locked out knee, I think only some individuals from a fully locked out knee can then flex the knee very quickly. I think most individuals, if they fully lock out their knee, it takes a bit more time and effort to then access their hip flexors. So I'm not saying have a bent leg in extension. I'm just saying maybe don't have a locked out knee. Have an extended hip, but maybe not a locked out knee. And that difference is important. You may sacrifice some stride length by doing that. You should sacrifice some stride length by doing that. But what you'll gain in frequency and step speed should balance it out. What you'll gain and be able to make sure every step remains reactive under you, every shin comes back to a similar body angle. What you gain from that enables you to transition without effort. Adam, give us an example. What does adding frequency to your acceleration do for you?
It feels choppier, but it sets me up to run better.
What does run better mean?
I move faster and it feels easier towards the end, setting it up right at the start.
So when we talk about acceleration, by all means, everyone thinks about your first 10 meters, your first 30 meters. But acceleration is exponential. The acceleration is all about continuing to get faster for as long as possible down the track. We measure it always by the first 20 or 30, but really we should be measuring it by at what point do you stop getting faster? At what point in your max velocity do you stop getting faster? That really is the end of your acceleration. So the question is, does that point stop at 25 meters or does it stop at 55 meters? So are we judging acceleration purely by your initial acceleration or all the way? So because of that, I always have to ask myself, are we looking for maximal projection in acceleration, which many people talk about, or are we looking for optimal projection during acceleration? And sometimes to be optimal, we have to find a balance between stride length and stride frequency. Does that all make sense? The swing limb. Triple joint flexion led by hip flexion. Post toe off. So just as the foot comes off the ground in the back leg, what do we want to see? We want to see all joints flexing, so hip, knee and ankle, but we want it to be led by the hip. So we don't want the foot to travel up as much. That means the knee is bending. Instead, we want the knee to bend very small so that the hip is bringing the knee forwards. I talk about punching the knees forwards. We talk about low foot recovery. Everyone knows that. Everyone talks about it and preaches it. A low foot recovery may not be as low as you think it should be. Some biomechs just say as long as when the leg is recovering, so really I'm talking about, it's a bit dark. Can you see this picture? Yeah. Really, I'm talking about this leg here. So as it's coming through, the question is, a low recovery to me is as long as this leg doesn't go above parallel to the ground. So if the shin stays at parallel to the ground as it's coming through, then actually it's relatively low. Can it be even lower and scrape the floor? By all means, as long as it doesn't end up open with the shin out in front. No problems. So if it stays low to the ground, the hip is doing all the flexion, the knee has some flexion, but maybe the knee doesn't really flex more than 90 degrees. And switching. Always switching. You want to always catch the step. You always want to be able to, when you punch your knee hits the top, you don't want to have a lag. You don't want to wait. As soon as it hits the top, you want to bring it back down. That means it's got loads of pre-tension. That means you're actually whacking the ground really hard. You're attacking the ground. You're not landing on the ground. And that distinction is really important. And it's really easy to land on the ground if the front leg is waiting. And why is it waiting? It's waiting for the back leg to finish pushing. So we have this scenario where it comes back to the fact that you need to push yourself and project yourself, but it needs to be as short as possible so the front leg can come back and set up your next step. And we're always doing this seesaw. And if I was going to prioritize on anything, I'd prioritize on making sure this front leg is ready to hit the ground whilst learning how to further my projection but still hit the ground. Does that make sense? I wouldn't prioritize the other way. I wouldn't say, let's just learn to project ourselves and let's not worry about the front step. Let's not worry about landing flat-footed, about over-projected and maybe staying horizontal, not raising our center of mass. Maybe if your race was to 15 meters, maybe if you wasn't doing an NFL combine, maybe, and you only cared about the first 30, would I suggest that? But even then, probably wouldn't. If the race is beyond just running to 20 meters, then you need to be raising your center of mass every step, and it needs to be simple. Oh, more words. If you haven't read the Altus Kineogram article, it's a good article to go and just break down each stage of a running cycle, some of the KPIs they're looking at for different phases in the cycle. And they describe this probably a bit more eloquently than I would. But like I said at the beginning, there's two priorities. One is to throw yourself forwards and catch a step. The next one in upright running is to just create loads of vertical stiffness and carry on directing it forwards. Carry on getting faster. So I'm not going to read through this because that's all it's really saying. And we'll play around with it. Is there any questions around this? Do we need to talk through it at all? Be stiff, have your toes up, be bouncy. Much easier than reading all of that. Once we start to understand and once we start to make sense, and once the athlete starts to make sense of an efficient running model, only then can we start to say what is limiting. What's my point? My point is sometimes we watch a junior athlete run or a new athlete or even an older athlete and we start saying, well, their hips must be weak or their calves must be weak because they can't do something. But we can't make a true judgment until they have an efficient understanding at least of how to run. Only then do we start to say, okay, well, we know that you've had enough time, we've regressed it enough, we've taken time, enough time to, for you to establish a stable running style that now we can see that there's a lot of side to side sway, let's say, or you can't rotate very well. Or even when your hips are high and you hit the ground, you can't create a lot of vertical stiffness. Then we could start to set some segmental goals. So first I start into segmental. First I start functional, just all body and just looking at movement. What's efficient? And then I'm starting to ask, okay, well, I know I'm a teacher and trainer. Yeah, I like to do both. People talk about training movement, not muscles. I think you need to train both. Okay, I think you need to make sure you're clear on efficient movement and have some functional exercises to develop it. But I also think you need to be like a physio. I think you need to be like a mechanic and say, well, I know that spending more time on the right ankle and right calf stiffness is going to fix some of the swaying and some of the rotational issues I'm seeing in the running style. It doesn't happen overnight. Being able to spot that as a coach, it doesn't happen overnight. It's easiest if you break your athletes. Because when you break them and then you have to fix them and then you see how that changes their running style, you go, okay, I get it. I've broken a lot of athletes. Yeah. So I'm no joke there, no joke at all. I've had to rehab athletes and they've come back faster each time. I've gone, you're training, you've trained better and responded better when you haven't been doing my plan. When you've been doing my plan B or plan C. And then you have to swallow that a bit. Yeah, you have to swallow that a bit. And then you go, okay, my next plan is actually the plan I was doing prior. And then you do have to become a bit of a biomech, a bit of a physio, a bit of an S&C coach. You do have to be able to apply what they know or have really good, smart people around you to support you. And again, that's what I've had. I've done some of the classic training behind some of those things, but more importantly, I found really good people who have helped me on the way. Start to understand, do we just want a strong core, or are there different ways of looking at core strength, at looking at trunk stability, trunk rotation, trunk anti-rotation, lumbar pelvic disassociation? These are terms that sound big and long worded, but actually they're just describing effective stability or mobility of your joints. And from the foot up to the cervical spine, each joint has a different role. It normally alternates. Maybe I can remember this. So it starts at the foot, and the foot should be stable. The ankle should be mobile. The knee should be stable. The hip should be mobile and then stable, like the lumbar pelvic spine. The thoracic spine should be mobile, should be able to rotate. The shoulder blade should be stable. So there's a nice joint by joint approach. An old paper written by, I think, Gary Gray or someone like that, or Gray Cook, that talks about the joint by joint approach. That is a very simple paper. I used to have it on my wall because it's just a reminder when I'm setting activities or when I'm assessing movement, what is the function of each joint on the way up? That's the first question. Then the next question is, how do I intervene? How do I change the function? How do I train the function? Really important. Oh, that's not good. Sorry, guys. Technology hasn't been my friend today. Wow. Now my laptop's just crashing. Give me a minute, I'm sorry. Force quit. Keynote.
No, I think it makes you better not be happy. Yeah, that was always the plan. Well, yeah. He's also going to socialise not to work. Great. Yeah, I know, I'm trying to keep a little, not too degree. Everyone's the same, you know.
That's what happens, isn't it?
See the facilities.
Oh, this?
Just so that one.
This way?
Yeah.
That way? I'm just spot on the
Sure,
that one over there?
they're not drinking that one.
I can move it here.
Okay, guys, spot the difference. What do we see?
Top one's faster.
Top one's faster.
With a lower knee recovery.
Lower knee recovery.
Heel.
Lower heel recovery. Okay, great.
And a higher knee.
And higher knees. Awesome. Okay. What makes you say that?
Bottom one just looks as if there's more plant in it. Top one looks as if it's pulled up more. The top one looks like it's stiffer.
Stiffer. How do you measure stiffness? What are you seeing with your eyes?
The bottom one, the ankle just looks. The toes pointing downward just.
Yeah.
Top one's more vertical.
Top one's more vertical. In what?
In the hip is under the shoulder, so you can actually project vertically.
Yeah, I agree. Good. I want you to tell me what stiffness means. I think it's important. I think you're 100% right. I want to know, what is your visual cue? What do you see to see stiffness? So you're saying the bottom one looks toey.
Yeah,
I agree.
And then just toe first, then.
I also think the bottom one looks like he's dorsiflex for a lot longer in the air. I mean, look at that's similar position. And some of it's to do with where the shin is. You talk about there's more stiffness. What says there's more stiffness to you? Or a different question, how do you create stiffness?
I would create it just by plyos.
Sorry, in what part of the running cycle do you actually set up the stiffness?
Every time before you land.
Before it hits the ground, yeah. So the original point was lower heel recovery, but importantly a high knee. And everyone coaches hind knees, and a lot of athletes are very good with their hip flexors to get high knees, but they think that's the end point. They think that's the objective. High knees is a process. You get your knees high so that you can whack the ground. And I think too many athletes run frontside mechanics at slow speeds and then backside mechanics at fast speeds because they don't actually know how to create vertical stiffness. They find themselves with their knees in front and they don't whack the ground really hard. They don't use that time in the air to get some pre-tension, to get some stretch, and then bring the leg back under them and have a foot ready to go vertical. And that's all we're talking about for high-speed running, is can you create lots of vertical stiffness by whacking the ground. It's not by pushing against the ground once you hit the ground, it's by hitting the ground before you land. It's about winding your knee up and whacking the ground from the air and being ready for it, being ready to bounce.
Is the position of the hip really important in that? Because they might feel like they're doing the same thing, but the hip could be in a...
Position of the hip is everything.
Yeah, so if it's behind, you could try and do that, but it'll look like a lot of them.
Yeah, exactly. And it will just get worse every step. So position of the hip is everything. When I talk about projection, I'm always thinking about hip muscles, great. When I think about reactivity, I'm thinking about ankles and knees, great. When I think about lumbar pelvic disassociation, which is basically, can you keep your pelvis in a neutral position or relatively neutral position when one leg is extending and one hip is flexing? So can you stay vertical when you're still trying to push horizontal? That is all about your trunk and your core. So sometimes it's important just to break it down. Take a look at 2 different videos, the same point in the run, and what are the shapes you're seeing. I think it's important to have a bandwidth of shapes. I don't expect everyone to be in the same spot. What I expect everyone to do is whack the ground and bounce off of it. And some people need a bit more time, and some people need a bit less time. Some people's hips structure doesn't allow them to extend their hip very much behind them. So actually they will look very, very typical to like an Asafa Powell strict running model. But it's not because necessarily they're more talented or gifted or more elastic. It's just they haven't got the space in their hips. So they just get off the ground. They have to get off the ground sooner. Some people are really lax. I have a few girls that are like wet spaghetti. And so they can extend and their heels can come as high as their foreheads and then get back in front. So I have to recognize that their hypermobility and their lack of any trunk stiffness will promote a far more stride length dominant running style. And as they become more mature, more stiff, they're able to rein it back in. So again, we're talking about running models, running technique. And there are some important KPIs to tell you if you are being more vertical, if you are creating more pre-tension, if you are being stiffer. And those are just really clear visuals. Yeah, at the same point in the running style, the picture on the right, he's already rotated forwards. The picture on the left, he's already starting to, all his forces are about to throw himself up. His free leg is about to, in this next cycle, this next frame, throw his body weight up. So it's going to be easier to be bouncy. If the midway through his stance, his free leg is still going forwards or still on the way down, actually being vertical stiff is going to be very difficult. Simple stuff, and I know some of this you guys have heard some great people speak to you, so I'm not expecting it to be brand new. It's just a reminder to always come back to what is our end point? Where do we really want to go? We want to go up and down in our max velocity. And sometimes to spot it, it's just really easy to follow one limb or one joint and recognize what that joint is doing. What shapes do you see? I used to watch all my video in slow-mo. My wife, Julie, loves watching video in normal time. And in slow-mo, you can't see all the shapes. Sometimes you have to watch video in normal time and almost go to a bit of your peripheral vision and it blurs out a bit and you start to see the shapes that make sense, the shapes that you need to be able to recognize in real time when you're coaching. And there's a right timing. There's a right timing to creating vertical stiffness. It's actually a very complex action, but we don't have to complicate it for our athletes. We just tell them to be stiff, to be bouncy, to get air time. They'll figure it out. We might draw them into some internal cue around what their ankle's doing or around what their upper body's doing. But essentially, it still needs to be a really simple, simplified way of talking about it. Whew. Talked about a lot already. Any questions? So, Bolt and Gay, we could talk about any two athletes that have very different profiles but run very fast. Bolt and Gay, you know, 15 centimeters in difference in height. Clearly a very different pattern of how they run 12 meters per second. One's very tall and really utilizes his leg length and doesn't over spin his legs. The other is relatively short, moves his legs nearly at 5 hertz. 5 hertz, hertz is in frequency is how many steps per second. 5 hertz is crazy. It's really, really, really fast. And yet still maintains a decent stride length. When comparing sprinters, it's important, and in fact, maybe I'm better off showing you something else. It's important to actually start to ask ourselves, what are they doing compared to everybody else? Desktop. Right, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if you analyze, if you take a look at, so these are each of the athletes at the London Games who made the final. Okay. I'm showing the wrong thing. This is each of the athletes at the London Games who made the final. And what's important to recognize is no matter what heights they are here, so these guys are all different heights, and no matter how long their stride length is, there's one common denominator. Because you could look at their stride lengths and say, whoa, okay, Bolt's 270 and Coleman's 233. But actually, relative to their height, and that's important to remember, relative to their height, all of them are running at stride lengths of 1.3 or more relative to their height. And maybe the exact same thing happened with the women, and I could be wrong, but I feel like that's the case. So a far bigger difference, and what you see is actually the difference is, the biggest difference is here with Muriel, who ramps up her frequency close again to 5 hertz. And what you see a lot of the time is at the elite level, if people are running at close to 5 hertz, their frequency is crazy, and they can deal with a stride length that's a bit less. But essentially, most of these individuals, again, are close to 1.3, and some of the fastest are close to 1.4. What does that mean? That means that no matter how tall you are or how fast you are, I believe there is a efficient stride length for you as a person at your top speed. And I'm always working towards it. And I'm always recognizing that my 5'7" boy and my 6'4" boy are going to look very different upright. And I'm working towards something else, something a bit different. That's important because at the end of the day, all of my boys are aiming to run around 12 meters per second. So no matter how tall you are, you know still the task at max velocity is the same. Everyone's trying to do the same thing. But how we do it might be differently. You may have to spin a lot faster because there's various ways to 12 meters per second. You can get to 12 meters per second by running stride length of 2 meters 80, like Bolt. Then you don't have to move your legs very fast. But can you do that consistently every step out of an acceleration for the last 30, 40 meters of a race? That's very difficult. If you can, efficiently, great. You're probably really tall. If you can't, if actually your optimum stride length is 2 meters 40, you got to move your legs at 5 hertz, 5 steps per second all the way. And then you'll do the same thing. So it's just recognizing that actually if you have an athlete who's got a gift, they've got really long legs, you can edit some of the goals you make around their stride frequency as long as they can effectively and efficiently maintain that stride length with a short ground contact time. Does that make sense? And I've just played around with a bit of a chart at the bottom. So if 1.25 to 1.3 is efficient, and we see some of these guys and girls going all the way to 1.35 or 1.4, I also want to know what 1.1 looks like. Because if that's in max velocity in a race, I probably still need to dampen it down a tiny bit and say, okay, this is our goal for when you're moving really, really fast. So when we're going to run through these wickets or run over these hurdles or run through these cones, I'm going to work at 1.2 for most of the season. And when you're in a good state and we're running in really fast to it, I'm going to move towards 1.25 and 1.3. It's going to be part of something I periodize over the year as part of my supporting my speed work. I'm not just saying I'm going to let you run faster and faster through timing gates. I'm also saying when I'm preparing you, I'm going to get you used to these higher lengths maybe, or these higher frequencies to what you're used to. I'm going to be a bit more dialed in with speed. Speed isn't just fast running. There are variables of stride length, stride frequency, ground contact time, air time. There are other variables that you can start to manipulate in your training to create a stimulus, to get an athlete to get used to what you want them to do come race day.
Can I ask a question? So presumably you're talking about bringing wickets in a bit closer during training. When you do that, do they automatically increase their frequency to keep the same speed, or do they slow down? What's their natural reaction to that, or is that a progression where they
bringing it in closer or taking it out for
bringing it in a little bit closer?
If I'm bringing it in closer, I would, in order to make that work, I would probably have a number of cones coming into the wickets so they're aware of how short the stride is going to be. And what would their natural reaction be? Their natural reaction would be to reduce their projection.
So they will actually initially get a bit slower over those?
I think they will go slower. I think they will end up bouncing up and down rather than forward and down. So we talk about bounce, and sometimes you can just bounce on the spot. Yeah. It's not very effective. You killed your projection. And I think they will end up doing that because they need to find a way to pace themselves to get through the hurdles.
But then they work it out themselves.
They have to work. Oh, yeah, I'll tell them off. Yeah. I'll tell them off. I'll say it was just up and down. I know you need to cut your stride a bit, but you need to now spin. You've got an opportunity. Yeah. Instead of killing your projection, spin even faster through it. So sometimes it just takes a bit of a nudge. Nice nudge. Same thing for increasing stride length. If you open someone up more than what they're comfortable, it might be under their optimal stride length, but for that stage in the year, how fast they've been running through the hurdles, it's a bit uncomfortable. What they'll tend to do is reduce their frequency, increase their ground contact time, and over project themselves horizontal. Again, that's naughty. Yeah, you want them to maintain up and down. So you're almost going seesaw with it. You want to make sure in order to make this bigger length, I want you to whack the ground harder, spend less time on the ground, and actually fly forwards. I don't want you to keep your hips low to spend more time pushing. Because an important thing here is that for every step in stride length, for every step on the way to your top speed, every step has to keep getting longer. Every step also, ground contact time, every step has to reduce. It's a bit of a mind combobulation. It's confusing. You're asking the athletes to go further but spend less time on the ground doing so. But that actually is speed. If you're going further and spending less time, your speed automatically is faster. That as a concept is really important because some people will focus more, and I've learned from coaches that will focus more on just longer, longer, longer. And then they'll tell the athletes for not being reactive in doing so and being flat-hipped and overreaching. I think you both. I think you can see him. So, for example, if you are introducing longer strides on wickets, let's just say, or even not, if you are just doing wicket running at the beginning of the year, you want them to firstly be comfortable with the stride length. Maybe they're not coming in more than 6 or 7 meters prior to the wickets. And maybe the space between their knees, maybe, it's easier to talk about here, maybe the space. So if we look at the left picture here, let's say that was the beginning of your new wicket cycle. What I would expect as the athletes become more comfortable, as they start to become more reactive, is actually the point between, if you draw a straight line down and measure that distance here, that distance I should expect to reduce. Yeah? What does that mean? It means that how much time they spent on the ground has reduced. So even if the wickets get even bigger, I don't expect this to swing out anymore. I expect these shapes almost to reduce as they get faster. Because what it's telling me is that you're managing to overcome the stride length I'm giving you, but you're doing it in short ground contact times, and you're doing it by manipulating your air to ground ratio and clearly orientating your force in the right direction. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, I think that's good. Do you ever get a point where you're trying to overcue people for switching, but they don't fully set up a reflex in their hip then? So that you're saying that the knee goes behind, sometimes when they're pushing this way, the knee will go behind the hip like this.
Yeah.
And then this is coming in a little. Certain people, if you try and get them to switch too much, do they come the other way? And then they don't get their knee. You don't set up a stretch shortness in the hip because you're switching.
They don't extend at all. Yeah, you do get that. And that's why having cones to remind them that no matter how much you've got to switch, you've still got to travel. Yeah. And it really is a seesaw. And if I'm coaching 8 athletes, I'm Jekyll and then I'm Hyde. I'm saying push longer and bounce further and spend less time on the ground. And I'm literally giving them opposite cues to find the medium. Or over time, I've definitely coached one of my girls to have too high a frequency and she lost her length. But what's great now?
The length, then it's okay.
Yeah, now it's about getting the length back, and we got it back during the season, but it was too late. So now it's about getting it back and making sure we don't lose the frequency we've spent 3 years building to get the length back. It's by maintaining the two, and actually early doors already seeing some really positive signs. To start to ask yourselves, for the athletes you've got, what is their optimal stride length based on their height? Everyone's a bit different. Not everyone's going to be 1.3. Some people are going to be 1.35. Some people are going to be 1.25. But you know that actually anything less than 1.2 at an elite level, or not even just at an elite level, in general, I don't think is going to be an optimal stride length. Okay? Recognize that speed is an exponential curve. Step length grows every step, but that growth reduces every step as well. Same thing for ground contact time, it reduces. But the one thing that actually after 2 or 3 steps that becomes pretty stable, relatively stable, is stride frequency. So this need to switch your limbs really, really aggressively and effectively from the beginning is really important. Because if you don't find it early doors, you're not going to find it late. If you don't set it up in your acceleration into your transition, if you're not transitioning with switching your limbs, you're not going to find it in your max velocity. Now, like I keep saying, if you're not transitioning when switching your limbs and you're just over projecting, you will run a relatively fast 20 meters, maybe even a fast 30, but you may not be able to carry it into your top speed. You know, the same thing applies for the other way. If you're switching really well, but every step isn't growing throughout your acceleration into your transition, into your upright running, you may run a really good 20 meters, but you may not be able to then kick again and carry that into your max velocity efficiently. And efficiently to me means without having to change something, without having to clearly alter your body position. You want to seamlessly, the athlete needs to feel seamlessly going from acceleration into max velocity and feel themselves bouncing almost by accident. rather than saying I've broken it up, I've done my drive phase, right now it's time to do X. No, it should be seamless. And if you find your frequency early on, it usually is seamless. That's a bit loud.
What did I just do wrong?
Training menu, I think it's important to recognize that every athlete's different, but at the same time, they're all trying to run from 0 to 100 meters. So having a menu that allows for you to be clear about your needs analysis, what you're trying to get from each of your training components that feeds the event, the competitive exercise, whilst also recognizing what breaks your athlete. When you're training really hard, where's the weak link? Where's the hole in the hose? What's the first thing to go? And then creating an individualized plan. And it might just mean 15 minutes of your warm-up specifically addresses their specific needs. I think it rarely is anything more than that. 15% of your warm-up prepares them to be mobile and stable in important areas that can easily break down. And maybe 20% of your S&C program is really specific to their individual needs. Everyone needs strong hips, everyone needs strong hamstrings, everyone needs a stable core, everyone needs upper body and lower body strength, basic strength, but some people are better off developing that in a certain way. Your exercise selection. I keep it really simple, at least I think I do. And I just ask myself across, so firstly, are we all familiar with Bondarchuk's table here? Is anyone not familiar? It's relatively simple. It's just saying at each level from competitive exercise, so let's say that at the beginning it's 100 meters. That's my competitive exercise, or really that's my event. And I can break that down into acceleration work or speed work. Special developmental exercises kind of look like acceleration or speed work, but they may be overloaded in some way. It might be sled work, overspeed, hill running, etc. It looks like sprinting, but I've changed something about it to create a bigger adaptation. Specific preparatory exercises in general prep just kind of look like plyos and look like gym-based work. Yeah, so it's just a simple way of being really clear about when I choose an exercise, where in the spectrum does it sit? Because you want to be really clear and direct with your stimulus. So once you've chosen where your exercise sit in your training menu, it's important to know how they interconnect with each other. So in my mind, if I want to develop a program that really supports acceleration, it makes sense that I have elements of resisted running, either bounding or actually sprinting, that I do some kind of intensive plyometrics, hurdle jumps, drop jumps, that's depth. Depth is a down path circuit that is just a range of different drop jumps. RIP is also a down path circuit, which is essentially standing long jump, standing triple jumps, and 4 bounds into a pit. So really simple things that support the development of acceleration. And by all means, Olympic lifts, compound lifts, pushing and pulling. To just strength. Better strength weight ratio will support my ability to apply forces quicker, that will support my ability to pull something faster, and that will support my ability to accelerate. Yeah, makes sense? Same thing applies to speed. So most of this stuff will be in your own training menus. Most of the stuff you guys will be doing. The question is, are you asking yourself about how's the best way to organize that work? So before you can organize it, you have to understand how it relates to each other. I will share this all with you guys. You don't have to write it all down. I'll share it all with you. So once you understand where things go, you can actually start to ask yourself, if for this next block, this next 4 weeks, I want to focus on acceleration development in one particular session or across different sessions on the track, on the bounding mat in the gym, there's probably some decisions that I can make. I can focus, of course, I've said acceleration, and maybe my goal is projection. So that means maybe around my acceleration sessions, before, after, maybe within, I probably want to do some really heavy resisted accelerations and some resisted bounding. And when I talk about heavy resisted accelerations, I'm talking about half, 75%, all the way up to 100% of your body mass. Some people are doing that stuff. Some people think it's taboo, and anything more than 20% is incorrect for resisted acceleration. There's a lot more research, again, from JB Marin and his group proving the opposite. I probably want to do some slow SSC jumps, so some plyometrics that encourage me to have a bit of a bend, dropping off of things, jumping, broad jumps, bunny hops, hurdle jumps that are a bit longer on the ground, encourage me to get a bit of bend in my knee and hip, because a bit of bend in my knee and hip and have to get out of that hole is just very similar to acceleration, where you have big bends in your knee and hip. And some heavy throws. Maybe some heavy throws from a static start, where I haven't got any momentum and I have to generate or take tension and slack out my system and generate force without a counter movement. Very similar to our block start. And then maximal strength and French contrast. French contrast are just basically maybe mixing some maximal strength work with some of my heavy throws and maybe with some bounding. Because I don't ever want to get away from the fact that I'm only developing maximum strength so that I can apply that force at a bit of a faster speed. So what I'm suggesting here, and the same thing applies to max velocity, I can start to make small edits in my exercise choice for that cycle, maybe surrounding a max velocity session, maybe on the same day. Before I go into even my max velocity work, I've done a few different exercises that support vertical stiffness, that support stabilizing and orientating my trunk in the direction I want to go. And my suggestion here is just saying that actually, even if you have a group of 10, that you can all be in the gym or all be on the track. And yeah, it means you're looking left and looking right and maybe multitasking, but actually you can actually apply a stimulus that is really specific to what you think the key goal is for your athlete. That may change week to month to month. That may change session to session. You might decide that Monday is an acceleration day and Friday is a speed day. And in order to enhance that, when I do my weights on the day or the day 2 days before, or on the afternoon of that session, I'm going to focus on these things. I still want to get strong. I still want capacity. I still want to be injury prevention. But how can I make some small changes, some subtle differences that actually really support the needs of this athlete? I'm not going to go through this too much. This is a model we use in team sports that applies that concept even deeper. And essentially, the head coach will decide on, and he will decide on it very flippantly, and sometimes their minds will change every week. But essentially, they'll decide, for this player, he's a left back, I really need him to be able to go up and down the pitch a bit faster, and he keeps getting cut on the inside, and he keeps rotating the wrong way. And I know actually 7 times out of 10 he rotates counterclockwise when he should go clockwise. and people just keep cutting an inside, and he leaves him 2 yards behind. So here you go. Here, S&C group or skills group, this is a key task I need you to change, and it needs to change quickly. We can't spend 6 weeks changing it. We might have 6 days. So then actually we start to ask ourselves, how can we edit bits in the warm-up, bits in post football session on the field, bits in the gym that support the technical goals of our head coach and the technical goals of our players. The same thing applies to track and field. I think that concept comes more from track and field than it does from team sports. In the guys that we know how to manipulate training variables far more discreetly and more accurately and plan them clearer. At least that's my belief, based on my experience. And of course, you need a plan A, plan B, and plan C. And we always ask ourselves, sorry, a bit loud for my little ears, that if we're developing acceleration, there are loads of ways to do it. Wow. We can push things, we can pull things, we can bound with it, we can walk with it. It all depends on what you think you need at that time. And I always say, if in doubt, find a fat coach. Yeah, the fatter the better. So I think the Jamaicans run so fast. Yeah. So do whatever you can within your means. You know, we sell exogenes. We've sold so many to team sports, to individuals. We'll use some today. It makes a lot of sense to people. Some people use sleds, no problems. Some people just use hills, no problems. Okay? They each have their own, some people push, some people pull things. They each have their own benefit. All teaching a very similar thing, but they each, you know, create a different environment for the athletes. And maybe if you're really lucky, you can progress from one means to another. We've been, maybe I can actually find a video. We've been, downloads. We've been using a prowler, a tank. They call this a tank. Just as a bit of variation. We haven't used hills for 2 years just because of where we've been based. It's a short video. And what's nice is that it takes your trunk stability out of the equation. So trunk stability and acceleration is a major factor of where your hip goes. But sometimes, as a result, it prevents you from just getting the work done. Just being able to pump your legs, have stiff ankles, work on using your hip flex as well. So we've taken it out of the equation. And then it's enabled us to cue, one, for them to get really strong and feel them lactic, but still get the job done relatively efficient. And it's enabled us to tell the difference between, and for them to tell the difference between good and bad. So that is what I would consider bad. This is, and then maybe this is a bit better. If I've got some recent video, it's even better. But it's a step-by-step process. And it's slow, it's repetitive. In fact, it probably is only just repeating your first 4 steps again and again and again and again over 20 meters. But I think actually that's really important. Maximum power, if you was to measure power in a sprint, only happens for a very brief amount of time, only around the 1 second mark. So maybe, let's say for a girl, around 6 meters, for a boy, maybe around 4 meters. That's your maximum power. And after that, it's all reactive, it's all elastic. But we all know that actually you can get to 50% of your top speed in your first couple steps. So repeating the first 4 steps again and again, becoming really strong and efficient at doing whatever your body can do in that position is really important. I'll play the one before. What's the difference, guys? I should have done this.
Casting out the shin.
Casting out on the shin. So this is the first one.
Pop-up is only.
You say what?
popping up.
Yeah, exactly. So this one is far more vertical. You talked about the shin. What do you see in this one in terms of the shin?
It's like, I'm actually wrong. I'll admit that. It's not. I thought his shin casted out more at the end, but it doesn't. It's the actual pop up at the hips.
He's got less ankle stiffness, but mind you, it's got a much heavier weight, so that's all right.
It's a heavy weight. So my question about ankle stiffness would be, once she's put full pressure, which is here, does it keep going down, or does it stay where it is? So yeah, you might land here, but she hasn't put full pressure. That's full pressure. Yeah, so that's a question. In spikes, full pressure comes a tiny bit earlier because of the plate.
Is that yielding happening because of the jumping up and down?
Say again?
Sort of yielding at the ankle and the knee, does that happen because it's jumping up and down in the foot?
It could be.
Or when you take that away, is it much easier to stabilise than the ankle?
What do you think?
That seems to not do as much.
Not do as much, yeah. I agree.
There still is a bit of lift in the hips.
There is, and I think
He's moving forward a lot further than the guys.
that's her in both videos.
Is it him in the videos? Okay,
Yeah.
that's-
Was it?
right.
Yeah.
Does her left ankle stiffness look different to her right?
You tell me.
I think it does.
Well, there seems to be more projection in that video than the first video.
Maybe it's the angle of the engagement.
It might be the angle. It might be the fact that we get to see her inside of her foot from this angle. So you guys are highlighting some really important things. Parallax issue. Sometimes you can't make a real assessment of a video unless they are here. And anything beyond being in line with the video, you start to get parallax. You start to see things. Again, left and right. If you're seeing the inside of a foot rather than the outside. If the movement on ground contact is to pronate, when you see the inside of a foot, you can see more action than when you see the outside of a foot. So loads of visual confusion. But no, I think you guys are highlighting some important things. You talked about casting of the shin. What's the difference in the leg recovery? So you talk about casting the shin. Describe what that is. I don't know if I can do these side by side. I don't think I can.
On the first video there,
Yeah.
the foot's sort of higher, so she's obviously slower to get the foot back down to the ground. Whereas the second video, the foot's casting, or the foot's remaining lower to the ground.
Yeah.
At the final point, but the foot's further forward. So that recovery is going to be quicker.
Fine. So we see that, guys? That recovering here, the foot, my visual point is the opposite knee. So when the foot's recovering, where is it crossing? The opposite leg or opposite. In this one, it crosses, a third of the way up the thigh. And this one, it doesn't even go above the knee. Yeah. So low, high recovery. I'm asking myself, I always want a reference point. The reference point is often the opposite limb. An important distinction, sometimes a low recovery is the shortest path for the foot to travel, and as a result, for the knee to travel. But if it's not what they naturally do, it is sometimes the slower way to do it. So it might be the short path, but actually for some individuals, allowing the lever to become short as it comes through makes the leg feel light, allows the hip flexors to bring the foot through quicker. So actually on the top, I reckon it's a really, for her, an efficient way to get her leg through, but not an efficient way to prepare for the next ground contact. So we're doing a seesaw. This is easy, but not the most efficient way. And it's actually fast at the moment. For this one here to become fast, we're gonna need to drill it. I'm gonna need to be a hard coach on her when she doesn't apply that same model. She needs to be clear on it, and she needs to be hard on herself. And we probably need 26 weeks. We need to consistently do it. We also probably need to say, okay, well, what muscles support this? Well, it's very much hip flexor based. It's very much hip flexor with a big long lever. So we better be supporting this technical model with some really specific lumbar pelvic hip flexor work. Does that make sense?
Is there an element to that, though, that the load on that cart is making a difference?
Uh,
Because it looks like a light load.
no, light load or heavy load, she will high recovery if she's given a chance to.
Okay.
Honestly. Because she's bandy and soft in the middle. Hypermobile throughout her whole spine, and then rigid in her top of her spine. Full of groin injury history, pubic osteitis type injury history. Her adductors are always on fire because they do all her stability for her. So flexing with a short lever and allowing her foot to come through is easy, it's simple. And actually creating the forced closure needed to keep her pelvis stable and really use her hip flexor the way she is in this bottom video is difficult, regardless of load. In fact, 2 sessions ago, she said, isn't it just heavy and that's why it's difficult? So we made it light and it was still difficult. Good point though. Where was I? Fat coach. Time away. This is just an example of why it's good to have dribbles and scissors and reactive stuff with good switching in your warm-up, because even if an athlete has had an injury, you can find that when they come back and, you know, physio says, whoops, no, don't want to hear my voice. Even though they come back and the physio clears them and they feel pain-free, often there's still some clear inhibition in how they move, and how they create pre-tension, how they decide to whack the ground or wait for the ground. And that's the great thing about dribbles and low-level plyos, and is that, one, you can highlight it, you can see it. What can we see, firstly, guys? What do we see here?
Ginger about how he puts his left foot in the ground.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is why inhibition and compensation can be very dangerous, because he's been cleared to go back to full training, but he's, like you said, he's hesitant about how he puts that left foot down. But as a result, what happens to that left leg? Why is that a concern, a further concern? He casts it out. He casts it out. He doesn't create any pre-tension with that limb. He allows the passive structures, basically he allows the leg to lock out to stop it from going any further. And if he runs faster and faster doing that, he's just going to actually re-injure the leg. To protect that limb, he has to become brave. He has to catch it early and whack it down and create pre-tension in all the other muscles. Because catching your leg isn't just a hamstring's job. The hamstring works with a quad. In fact, they work secondly to the glute. The glute's what drives the leg back down. So the point here is that having a number of low-level drills that the athletes are really familiar with and do on a regular basis becomes a screen for you, becomes a screen for them, and an opportunity, even if they've had a recent hamstring injury or any injury, to work on rhythm timing and to turn their timing and their inhibitions off.
On that, spoke last week about using concentric or a more elliptical pattern at different times coming back from injury. Opinion on that, on the shapes you're trying to create with dribbles? Do you differentiate?
Yeah, I think for me, if I'm worried, I will straight leg scissor them, keep them really small, and then you're not getting this eccentric stretch of hamstring each time. It's just quite an isometric and a bit more of a concentric action at the quad. And what it does is that you still get a tiny bit of eccentric at the glute. You still get that timing, that important timing of width from the hip without having to get a big eccentric. 1 and 2, the smaller the leg cycle, like here maybe he starts tiny, maybe not. But the smaller the leg cycle, the less, again, eccentric stretch there is on any of the passive structure or any of the posterior structures. So a similar kind of thing.
Yeah, I think he said he sort of went more towards an elliptical, a longer pattern as they're getting closer to back on the track.
Okay.
Initially he used quite a concentric, just
Up and down.
up and down.
Up and down.
Yeah.
Up and down is really easy way to carry on working on elastic bounciness without having to get the associated stretches. So it's both smaller cycle, up and down, and maybe no cycle at all at the beginning. Max velocity, I'm not going to talk too much about this. Hurdles, wickets, we do it from a variety of distances coming in, a variety of efforts, and the closer and closer we get to maximum stride length, the more and more we have to push really hard to get into it. So we're still looking for our same cues that we looked for earlier on at slower speeds. And the athletes will say, whoa, that's way too long. You just have to say, you got to keep running faster throughout it. You have to give them bravery to stick to what they know or what they've been working on at higher speeds. And sometimes that just becomes being really unvocal on the track. Yeah, I'll be quiet until the point I need to be vocal, and then be really vocal. Give them some arousal. Sometimes you have to give them that come to Jesus speech. You have to give them that, come on guys, why are you here? And get a bit of arousal out of them, because sometimes the people think running over wickets should look pretty. And if it's pretty, it's fine. It's like, it's not fine, because if you can't run that same way when you've got two aggressive people either side of you and you're running an 8-lane track, then it's not going to be good enough. So you need to be outside of your comfort zone. Otherwise, yeah, drills and wickets are just pretty.
With your wicket spacing, are you basing that off your up and jump and that around step length, or are you going just purely off your eye?
I'm going off my eye, so I have looked at a lot of up to jump over the past 3 years, and I have studied a lot of race profiling of people in their top speed, what their stride length is relative to their height, and then I've just played around. And you kind of know what is easy for a group of people relative to their height. You know what's going to be a bit more challenging and needs a bit more speed coming in. And you know what's going to be really challenging and needs a lot of speed, and maybe it's not even something you do every week, because they will have to, if they are a tiny bit fatigued and don't have the right amount of momentum and reactivity, they will have to reach to make it. So that's almost like you don't do flying 30s every week. You choose the time and place to do it. And I think it's the same thing with it. And then blah, 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 loads of just fun stuff that is more about conditioning hips, pelvis, and timing. And then lateral plane. We do this a lot. These are team sports guys, football, rugby, but we do very similar things with our sprinters. And it probably becomes a health thing more than anything. I find that when they can do their plyometrics, especially groiny, hippie people that have that kind of injury history, medial hamstring, medial groin, lower back, herniated stuff, those kind of individuals, calf injuries that are more lateral calf, are more small tendinous stuff as opposed to big Achilles stuff. Often the solution is making sure they're strong, stable, explosive in a lateral plane. We spend all day, every day, running in a straight line, or maybe running forward and taking a left. We don't really spend a lot of time going lateral. Our sport doesn't really demand it clearly on paper, but actually every running cycle, every time you exchange your limbs, your pelvis is doing this each time. So you need that ability just to work your lateral plane. And then we just do low-level plyos. So that's the spectrum. That's the spectrum of exercise selection. Just some examples, from specific to general. Of course, we do down circuits and a variety of other circuits. It's all general strength. It's traditional pillar strength, rotational strength, lower abs. We lift, we squat, we deadlift, we do all the other bits, like everyone should be. The difference is, or the question is, how do you prepare that for your individual? And how does that work into your weekly plan? Yeah, I have 2 separate groups, 7 who are seniors and they train 3 double days a week and 3 single days. A double day is a 9 o'clock start, 9:30 start, maybe till 12, lunch, and then back in for another 90 minutes in the gym. a single day is a quick warm up, a lot of general mobility, a lot of hurdle mobility, a lot of circuits, maybe some yoga, maybe some Pilates, some treatment. And I have a junior group who train 5 single days a week. I have a client who she works and she can only train 3 days a week, 3 single days a week. So the question is, when you've got 90 minutes with your individuals, what do you do? When you've got the luxury of 25 hours in a week, what do you do? How do you distinguish that? How do you work all the different components towards where you want to go? That's the hardest part. That's what I'm not going to talk about today. Good? Any questions? I've whizzed through a lot there very quickly.
Your monitoring of striking.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, yes. I mean, very happy with what's the simplest way would you say of doing it?
Simplest way is an iPhone, a static camera. So an iPhone with a tripod, firstly. Something to be able to measure on the track. So if you had an iPhone and you made sure it could see a whole 10-meter segment, and in that 10 meters, you've got cones every 2.5 meters. Okay, so you've got 4 cones in the track, maybe it's a bit more, 5 maybe. So you can at least see what every 2.5 meters look like. And then someone runs through that. Every iPhone has slow-mo these days. You can capture it and you can count frames per second. You can count how much time they're on the ground. You can measure their stride length, or at least you can see how many steps they take within that 10-meter segment, and you can actually come up with your stride frequency. You can come up with your step length. If you want even more accuracy, you put cones down every meter on it, and then you can be a lot more accurate about it. You can get My Sprint app, which will help you. You can record panning over 30 meters. And then you can get, the app is really well designed that you can actually get the splits, the 10-meter splits, really simply. So without using timing gates. And you can create some kind of force velocity curve. It might be useful to you guys, it may not. And there's another app, and I have no shares in any of these apps, guys. So I should do by the way I promote them. There's another app called Runmatic. Yes, Runmatic is pretty cool. Again, it needs to be a static camera. But it's designed to identify asymmetries. So it can easily help you measure ground contact time and air time. And you can start to look at asymmetries. But modern day, if you've got an iPhone and you've got some cones on the track, measuring tape, you can get all the information you need. It might take a bit more time to process, but it's valuable information, and you don't have to measure it all the time. If you're running fast, if this week or today is a day that you expect them to run fast, get some good, clear video of them. If possible, static camera on a tripod, clear video of them. If possible, in the same spot each week or each time you do that fast session. It doesn't have to be the same spot. It just has to be the same distance away from them, capturing the same type of image, if it's a 10-meter segment or 20-meter segment, with some markers. Yeah. If you can do that consistently over the season, each time you run really, really fast, you'll have some great data to compare. When they were running, 3 seconds for flying, whatever, and when they were running 2:55, what changed over time? When I put a static camera in front of my wickets, what did it look like? Dartfish app or Coach's Eye app. Okay, when I look at a video that I really like and I look at a video that actually I'm a bit confused, they ran really fast but it looked messy and I was a bit confused, I want to see what the comparison is, great, get my app, I'll pull it next to each other or side by side, and I go, okay, what are my key points in the running cycle? Okay, stance phase or initial stance, midway through, toe off. When I start to compare it, just like I did with the footballer, oh, okay, yeah, I see what changed. I get it. If you don't have the ability to compare video really clearly and concisely and believe the video, and that's why I say static camera, same place, because video recording a run at this kind of angle will show up different shapes. Yeah, that's parallax issue. We don't want that. We want to have not a non-biased eye when we're looking at video. That is the easiest, simplest way to do it. iPhone. Or any other brand. I have no shares in Apple. Yeah. Anything that can give you clear, consistent video. Any other questions, guys? I know we've got loads of time to do practical. I'm here all day, so you can ask me anything else, but no? I think it's time for a break.